Hey! So in this video, I'm just gonna go over briefly what a typical art process is like for me when I paint. I always start off with just some fast sketching. I try not to get too big with these sketches. I'm just trying to get like a good idea or a good pose. And then I go over it in tracing paper, and then I try to finalize it into a bigger scope just to kind of figure out the shapes I'm using. And then I transfer it onto a piece of watercolor paper and I just start painting. For this piece, I'm using the Rowney FW acrylic inks, and I started using these inks back in college, and I just fell in love with them. I loved using acrylic paint, and finding these inks gives me the versatility of inking and acrylic. I just love the pigment it causes. Like, I can dilute it with water, or I can have just straight up pigment and it'll be very graphic and strong. So the versatility is what I really love about these types of inks. In this case, I am diluting with water. I don't use too much because it does get a little splotchy if you use too much water, or if your paintbrush isn't wet enough. But if you get it just the right consistency, it creates this great texture that I love. And sometimes you do have to go over it a couple times just to get a stronger pigment, or just to smooth out some blotches. Typically, it does dry very fast because it is acrylic based, and acrylic usually tends to dry at a faster speed than any other paint. So I'm setting down my first base of color for the skin tone. I will be going over it a bit later, again, just to get that stronger pigment that I was talking about. And one of the reasons I do like to start off a bit more diluted with my water is because I like starting off a bit lighter. It just, it helps when you're trying to figure out your values. And sometimes the paint doesn't really dry consistently, so sometimes it'll dry darker than it appears to be when it's wet, or it'll dry lighter. So just having that base be lighter, it gives you more versatility about, okay, is this light enough, or should I make it darker? So I can always go back and add a darker value to it if I need to. Because when you're working traditionally, you can always move forward, but you can never move backwards. And if you've noticed on my little spare sheet of paper, I do have a small color guide that I made. So basically, I just make a teeny tiny version of my painting and do color tests just to check that I'm using the colors that I want to, or that I like the pairing of the colors that I'm using. With the hair, I'm going in a bit more saturated, a bit more pigmented, just because on my color test, the one I just mentioned, the hair is going to be kind of like the brightest part of the piece. So I am confident enough to just go in straight ahead with the darker values and the more pigmented hues. And as you probably noticed, I was using a water brush, which is basically a brush that has water in it, and you just squeeze it to release the water. And the reason I used it is because when I do go into like the highlights of the hair, all I have to do is just squeeze a bit of water out, and it mixes in with the ink. And I'm able to create a more gradient into the hair. Okay, now for my favorite part. I do love the line inking. Inking is my favorite part of any piece, and I think it's because I can just get into it and zen out and just uh, it's not showing in the video because I obviously sped it up for, you know, video time reasons, but I am taking my time and I do ink very slowly, but I get really into it. I like using tiny brushes, but really the thing I like best is just the fact that you can really get any kind of line width with any brush if you practice enough. Like, it doesn't matter if you use a tiny brush or a big brush. If you know how to utilize the tip of the brush or the width of the brush, you can really create some great line width. And I think that's what I like practicing and why I like inking so much. But yeah, let's just zen out for a bit and see where this takes us. So we're going to go in back again with the water brush, and I'm just going to be making just more shadows on the figure. It's good to use the water brush because, like I said, with the hair, if you push more water into your inks, you're able to dilute it a bit more as you're painting, and so you can create basically the amount of dilution that you need. In this case, the whole time I am squeezing a bit more water out from the base of the brush out onto the tip, just to, you know, kind of mix in the paint a bit more, make it mix a bit more with the base that I already have. And once that first shadow base dries, then I go back in and do an even darker base because I did notice that the skin tone isn't as dark as I wanted it to be, so I'm just going back in just to make it a bit darker. And now more detail. I love getting into the details. Like I said, I just zen out and I just try to like make it as clean and as I don't know, nice as I can. I don't know, I don't really know how to explain this part. It's more of just me, just all my years of learning how to pick and choose what details to add and what not to add. It really is kind of what you want the amount of detail to be like. At this point, I know it needs a little something extra, so I'm going back into the hair and adding more line. And the whites were a bit too bright, so I decided to go back in with a diluted black, like a gray, just to kind of add more shadow into the white areas, just to help with the contrast and not make it pop out too much against all the dark tones in the skin and in the hair. Again, using my water brush, I love this thing so much. I squeeze out the water so that way if my diluted black is still too dark, then just squeeze that water out and dilute the darker color. You know, I'm kind of glad I'm filming this because I just noticed that I don't really do all my line art and all my detailing at the same time. I'm kind of noticing that I just kind of take it piece by piece or like area by area, and I think I like to do that because sometimes I do like to wait to see how my focal point is looking before I add detail in any other areas, just in case I don't want to overwhelm it with detail. I like to just take my time and figure it out as I go, especially if it's just something I'm painting on the spot and not really thinking too much of or creating like too many like first drafts. This is just for fun, so that's why I like to just take it as I go. And now I'm just going to add in the final little bits and just going to go back into it and add a bit more of a blush look. So basically just try to mix in some of the orange into the skin color just to kind of combine the purples and the oranges together. I like to add just little bits here and there to kind of create like a more differing skin tone effect to it. I don't know, it just looks really good. I've always done it and I will always do it because I love it. I love the effect it gives it. And there you have it, just a quick little painting doodle, and that's just kind of how I do it each time. Hey, and if you like this video, give it a like and subscribe if you want to see any more. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments and I'll answer anything I can. Thank you so much, guys. I really, really appreciate it. Have a great day.